Privit mi druzy. Okay, I think I've got it, but I'm not. If I don't get it, I'm not going to go any further. This is the best that I can do right now until I find somebody who can actually tutor me. Hi, friends. My name is Darren Gerdes. I am a professor who just has been tracking what's going on in Ukraine since about the beginning of the war. I've been doing these videos since day 85. Here is today's update. It is day 339. We're going to talk about how the Russians lie. I mean, this is nothing new, but I'm going to show you how they do it. We're going to talk about fighting on the front lines and the new offensive that is coming down the pike. They know it, we know it, the Ukrainians know it, we all know it. It's coming. We'll also talk about who wins in the result of a stalemate. We'll talk about Ukraine working for more combat effectiveness and what that looks like. And then we'll also talk about a new game that we'll be playing here on this channel of Where's Waldo? You'll see what I'm talking about when you get to the very end, so stay with me. Okay, we're going to start with the British Ministry of Defense's intelligence update. We're going to go all the way back to the beginning of the month. Russia highly likely suffered more than 300 casualties in a strike on troop accommodation at Makivka Vika near Donetsk City on 1 January 2023. Okay, now we all remember this strike. The Ukrainians said that there was probably hundreds killed. The Russians said that there were 89 killed. So the difference in the number of casualties that Russia acknowledged and the likely true totals highlights the pervasive presence of disinformation in Russian public announcements. Now, they do this all the time. They do this intentionally. They do this because they're trying to create a bizarre alternative world where you can't really believe whatever it is. If they know truth and they know what's not truth and you can't tell the difference, they have a significant advantage. So this is why they lie. They lie and they lie and they lie. This typically comes about through a combination of deliberate lying authorized by senior leaders, and it's also people lying to them. That's the fascinating thing. And the communication of inaccurate reports by more junior officials keen to downplay their failings in Russia's blame and sack culture. So not only do senior leaders lie strategically, but junior leaders lie to them strategically so that they're not getting in trouble. So you have layers and layers upon lies. So it comes to the point where one of my comments on yesterday's video said this: when I was serving in this is Vanth Spirit Walker, great comment. When I was serving in the Air Force, we had a rule: never believe any news until the moment the Russians deny it. Yeah, there's something about that. That's what I was saying yesterday when I was showing you this video. I showed you an RT or Pravda article, and I said, well, but see how they're denying this? This is kind of proving that this actually did happen. Okay, so you can't always say that, but yeah, generally speaking, there's something to that. Okay, to defeat Putin, we must support the brave Russian journalist telling the truth. So if you didn't watch yesterday, please go back and watch yesterday, because I also talked about how this was in the ISW piece, a number of Russian media outlets are being pushed out as saying they're undesirable or whatever, because liars can't abide by people that are still telling the truth, right? That undermines what they're doing. And so they're talking here about a tiny minority of courageous journalists who are trying to make a difference. Look, on balance, the Russian population is kind of asleep. They've been pushed down by years of, if you talk and you try to come against the government's going to crush you. And so there's this apathetic kind of culture in Russia, and it's hard to awaken it. These journalists are doing their best, and they ought to be supported. A tiny minority of courageous journalists who are trying to make a difference, publishing independent, credible news for audiences back home. It isn't easy. They've been blocked, banned, bullied, banished from Russia. They've been condemned as foreign agents and undesirables, and their journalists, funders, and readers have been threatened. A little bit more, independent news websites such as Medusa and Hold say that they reach millions of unique browsers in Russia thanks to mirror websites, virtual private networks, VPNs that can dodge the censors, and hard to block channels like email and Telegram. So somebody told me early on that one of the fastest selling things in the App Store was VPN early in the war, and that's how people are getting their news. But that doesn't mean that they're rising up in the streets. And I would not. This is just me. This is my studied opinion. I don't have anything else to say other than it's my studied opinion. I I wouldn't put any stock in the people rising up in the streets to overthrow Putin. I just don't see that as any possibility at least in the short term. I don't see that. But these people are doing a great job of trying to get the truth through. So when you see things like the Moscow Times, and I'm going to show you an article from the Moscow Times, like they're really doing heavy lifting, right? Now, you can also tell when the Russians are lying because what their friends say. So when North Korea slams the U.S. over a decision to send tanks to Ukraine, when they're saying it, you can tell. And so the Russians are saying it's nothing to see here, but the North Koreans are also saying, hey, this is more American warmongering, right? You can be assured that they're really concerned about this kind of thing. North Korea condemned on Friday the decision by the United States to supply Ukraine with advanced battle tanks to help fight off Russia's invasion, saying Washington is escalating a sinister proxy war aimed at destroying Moscow. Well, there was no way that they could aim to destroy Moscow by these means until Russia invaded its neighbor, right? The U.S. wasn't about to send tanks into Ukraine before that, insisting that the West's hegemonic policy forced Russia to take military action to protect its security interests. Again, that's Russian propaganda through and through. Now, North Korea has also used its distraction created by the war to accelerate its own weapons development. Doesn't matter that people are starving, but let's create our weapons development. Test firing more than 70 missiles in 2022 alone. But when you do that, now Japan and South Korea are very uneasy with the way that you're doing what you're doing. So there's a cause and effect that's taking place here, and it won't go unnoticed. Okay, let's turn our attention to the ISW, Russian offensive campaign. This was yesterday. President Putin is preparing a new offensive to regain the initiative that may begin as early as February or March. A later date is far better than an earlier date. The longer this delays, the better it's going to be for Ukrainians, because the more tanks and other equipment will get to the battlefield before this kicks off. So I'm hoping it doesn't come quickly, but remember, there's a date coming up. February 24th is the one-year anniversary, and Putin wants to have something to show for that, I'm very sure. The Kremlin is likely preparing to conduct a decisive strategic action, most likely in Luhansk Oblast in the next 6 months. And I keep seeing Luhansk, Luhansk, Luhansk. It strikes me as that would be where they want to do that. That doesn't mean that that's where the Ukrainians will want to strike. They might strike, say, in Zaporizhia, but we'll see. The Kremlin confirmed that the Russian President Vladimir Putin is issuing preemptive pardons for convicts who serve in Russian operations in Ukraine. Somebody commented, and I couldn't find the comment. I was trying to find it. They said, if you take apart the insane ethics of this is actually kind of a genius move on Putin's part, because you're clearing the prisons and you're getting men on the battlefield without having to mobilize another. That next wave of mobilization has to come sooner or later if the Russians are going to hang in there. But yeah, it is evil genius if you set aside the ethics. But think about this. Let's say that you're the sister of someone whose brother was murdered by this guy who's now pardoned just because he goes to the front, and now he walks around on the streets after he gets back. You're not very happy about this. There's cause and effect, and that effect is going to be very damaging to the Russian psyche and the population. Okay, so let's go on to the next. And that is that there is, and I said the fighting on the front lines and nothing burger. And what I meant by that was it's not the big fight. There is fighting, like there's fighting in Voldahar right now, and it's significant fighting. I'm not minimizing that. What I am saying is this isn't the big push from the Russians to like regain the momentum or retake Ukraine or whatever it is. But it is legitimate big fighting, and people are legitimately dying. Here's Radio Free Europe. Russian strike on a city in eastern Donetsk killed at least 3 people on January 28th. That's today. Ukrainian forces engaged Russian troops in ferocious battles in several hotspots where Moscow's been pressing the offensive. Zelensky, in his nightly address, talked about how they need more weapons, that the fighting is acute. I think he used that language. The enemy continues conduct offensives in the Bakhmut, Advinka, and other directions, said the general staff. Ukrainian military spokesman told the local media that there is fierce combat in Voldahar. So it's not nothing in the sense that like nobody's dying or being, there's not casualties. There are. But but it's not the big offensive. Now, the Secretary of Ukraine's Security Council told Radio Free Europe that Moscow was preparing for a new offensive on February 24th, the first anniversary of the Russian invasion. I see that again and again in multiple articles, so I think there's probably something to this. Now they're preparing for maximum activation. They believe that by the anniversary, they should have some achievements. There is no secret that they are preparing for a new wave by February 24th, as they themselves say. Okay, so I think that's true. Tanks won't be to the battlefield until, well, not in mass, not in enough firepower that you can really do things with it. There's not, like, they're coming in March. So February 24th is a little bit early, but again, Putin wants that. Here, this is the Moscow Times. This is free, independent news from Russia, but it's not officially sanctioned news. Ukrainian troops were locked in fierce confrontation with Russian fighters on Friday for the control of Waldo. We were just talking about this. And again, there is no secret that they're preparing for a new wave by February 24th. They themselves say, okay, I'm telling you, it's coming. We're right around the corner from it. Now, if Putin can get some kind of major victory, that's great. He looked, I mean, for him, that he'll think of that as, that's great. We can show that we have some achievement. If he can't, though, like, what happens in the event of a stalemate? Who wins the stalemate? And I've been wrestling with this for a little while. I don't think it works out for Ukraine. I mean, I think temporarily it works out for Ukraine to say, you can't take us. But in the long term, like 2024, 2025, ongoing, and I know that what I'm saying is hard to hear, but it could be a possibility. Putin wins in the case of a stalemate. That means that the odds are stacked against Ukraine, where they actually have to have a victory. They can't have a scenario of a stalemate. Otherwise, you have a East Germany, West Germany, or North South Korea kind of scenario, and that's going to be very, very bad for Ukraine ongoing. So Putin kind of wins just by not losing, if that makes sense. Now, there's this interview with a noted historian, Lawrence Friedman, and he's talking about, well, can Putin end it? They're asking him. He says, I think it's very difficult for him, because as soon as he ends it, there's a reckoning, and the cost of this war will have to be posed against whatever has been gained. And I think it's affecting his strategy at the moment. My one explanation of what's going on and the ferocity with which they've gone for Bakhmut is that they still have this idea that if they can take all of Donetsk and hold on to Luhansk, that might work. That he can say, look, I have these regions. I mean, it was costly, but we took these regions. We now have this buffer zone. But the buffer zone is now part of Russia, so there's no buffer zone. The new buffer zone is the rest of Ukraine. And so that's the way that they're going to be thinking about how the West is so close and so eminent on the Russian border. So I don't think that'll even fly. They'll have a new buffer zone that they'll have to push out. That might work as a victory they can sell, he was asked. He said it could possibly work as a victory that they could sell. Their problem is that the Ukrainians at most might accept a ceasefire. They certainly won't agree to a ceasefire in terms of transfer of sovereignty. And I think that's right. I mean, I don't think that the Ukrainians want to accept a ceasefire. They will only do that if they don't have the weapons to press the fight. But that's where we are. A little bit more, Friedman says, I don't think Russia could win outright victory, because I just don't see how he can subjugate Ukraine right now. So it can redefine victory. I don't think it can subjugate Ukraine either. Ukraine has the will to fight. It's their land, their people, their next generation that they're fighting for. Can Russia be defeated outright? If Ukraine was able to push Russian forces out of all Ukraine, that would be a defeat. Okay, so how do we define victory? And that's really important. So we have to define, so we had a general speak at my university just a couple days ago. He's a 3-star general, and he was talking about, we don't really know what victory looks like. And I'm thinking, we do know what victory looks like. At least the Ukrainians know what victory looks like, and that's pushing the Russians out of their land. That's victory. Okay. But the West, as the West, Biden and Macron and whoever else, they're not exactly sure necessarily what victory looks like. But Zelensky is. If Ukraine was able to push Russia forces out of all Ukraine, that would be a defeat for Putin. It's not wholly impossible, but I think at the moment it's very difficult. It's not impossible. I think to lose Crimea would be unequivocally a big defeat for Putin, and I think that's right. And if the Ukrainians could do that, they would very clearly have a victory. But what does that victory look like for Putin? That's a defeat for Putin, and he is now in danger of losing everything, and that makes him not want to not want to allow anything, and he'll do whatever. He'll sacrifice however many people he needs to sacrifice in order for that not to happen. In the meantime, the Ukrainians are now in a negotiation, a transfer of aircraft and long-range missiles, and they're being carried out with partners in an accelerated mode. And what does that mean? Well, their first request is Ukraine intends to receive 24 fighter jets from international allies as part of its first batch. Now, this was a red line before the red line before the red line before the red line for the Russians, but they keep just going over these red lines. And again, I talked about this yesterday about I don't think the Ukrainians can use a nuclear weapon. And I did a little short yesterday where I said, I clarified something that I was saying. So if you're in a bar fight and you have a gun, just having a gun it makes you an instant black belt, right? I mean, now you're extra powerful. That's kind of like having the nuclear weapon. But if you can't access that gun, my argument is that the Russians cannot use a tactical nuke or a nuclear weapon on Ukraine or any of their allies without being like it would blow up in their face. It's like a gun, a hand grenade, whatever. They can't use it, so they have to fight. So having a gun makes you an instant black belt, but not being able to access the gun, you still have to be a black belt in that bar room so that you can fight without it, or you have to be able to access the gun. And if you can't access the gun, it doesn't make you a good conventional fighter. So their conventional forces aren't fighting well, and just having nukes don't make their conventional forces fight well. That's what I was trying to say yesterday. Okay, so at any rate, now it's going to be a matter of who can muster combined arms, that is, infantry supported by artillery, supported by tanks and armor, supported by air force. And so the Ukrainians are trying to get tanks and armor, and they're trying to get fighters so that they can have the air superiority as well. So the first priority is to get American F-16s, although Kyiv is considering the option of French or Swedish planes as well. But anything that they can get is better than what they had before. They also, and I saw this a couple days ago, the first MKVI patrol boat breaks cover. So they have almost no navy to speak of. They scuttled a couple of their own ships, and they also destroyed a number of, without any navy to speak of, they destroyed Russian vessels. So it's pretty impressive. But now they're getting everything that they can in every direction, and I think that's great. Okay, so now we're going to play a new game here, and it's kind of like Where's Waldo, except it's Where's Larissa. Remember Larissa, the lady who kept showing up in all Putin's posed pictures where he had like she was military, or she was a grieving mom, or she was a fisherman, or whatever else? Well, I've embedded Larissa somewhere in this video. So did you see it? If you did see it, good on you. Tell me in the comments without telling us where it was that you are aware of that, and we'll just play that game periodically from now on. All right, thank you. If you have enjoyed this, please hit the like button. That's one of the best things that you can do to support the algorithm. If you want to support Ukraine, buy something with Ukrainian garb. If you look behind me, you're going to see just behind me over here a globe with a Ukrainian hat sitting on it. It's kind of a metaphor, and like Ukraine is kind of what's going on there is what's affecting the globe. And I do that intentionally. So once you see it, you can't unsee it. Buy something here, support Ukraine, and in the process, you'll be supporting a Ukrainian entrepreneur who will be making his living not on the dole, not trying to just scrap by, but be able to support himself and his family through that. If you want to support other charitable organizations like United 24, the links to both the Ukraine clothes and mugs and hats and things along those lines and United 24 are all below. And I think I'm just going to call it and say what I used to say. For those of you who are new to my channel, I used to say, instead of trying to butcher the language here about Ukrainian, I used to say this. I used to say, thank you for being the kind of person who cares about Ukraine. And I think I might just go back to that because that's really my heart. I'm glad that you're here, and thank you for watching this video, and I hope to see you tomorrow.